There we go.
Yeah.
You're live.
Okay. See, it actually goes on live before it tells me that I'm on live. And I have to wait till it comes to me to mute it.
There we go.
Yes, we've muted. Yes. Okay. There we are. And we're going to start
So I gotta mute me.
11 on the dot by lighting a candle and saying, welcome to Community Church of Boston. My name is Dean. I use the pronouns he, him, and I humbly admit that we stand on ground that used to be underwater, and the fishies swam under us, but then it was filled about 170 years ago with fill and turned into the Back Bay. And along the edges, the Massachusetts and the Pawtucket and the Nipmuc tribes held forth for thousands of years, and we honor them. And we wish you a happy holiday and happy solstice upcoming here. And so we light this candle this morning for the joy of unity and of being together during this holiday season. We light this candle also in memory of several people I want to mention, and open it up to anybody else who wants to remember somebody. The first one is named Bill Staines, and he was a luminary in the field of folk music and songwriting. He passed away just last week. I remember him well. What I loved about Bill was that he pieced together a living from everywhere, from playing on huge stages. The Prairie Home Companion was one of the places I heard him in the early 80s. And the next week after that, I heard him in a funky, rowdy bar in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Pieced together a living, got a chance to play every chance he got. And we miss Bill Staines. His song called River is a regular song that I sing. River, take me along in your sunshine. Sing me your song, ever moving and winding and free. You rolling old river, you changing old river. Let's you and me, river, run down to the sea. I'll sing the whole thing for you if you come down here and ask me to sing it. It's a beautiful, beautiful song. We also remember Scott Alaric, who was folk music's foremost documenter and author, and wrote biographies. He wrote for the Boston Globe for quite a few years, and he had a program on WUMB where he held forth and did just stories of the folk world. Finally, the saddest one is my friend named Donna. I don't even know Donna's last name, but she worked in the post office, and I saw her whenever I went into the Roslindale post office. And Donna and her husband Kurt would come to the farmers market on Saturdays. Every Saturday they were there, and they were customers of mine, and just sweet folks that I just loved. I saw them together all the time. When she was not in the post office, she was with Kurt. Kurt is a retired school bus driver. He drove my son to school for a couple of the years that he was at the Mission Hill School. So we remember all those three, and we invite all of you to call in if you would like a moment at the beginning of our meeting to remember someone. Just let us know in advance, and we will put you on. So thank you. I want to welcome Beatrice Greene. I have to just move the laptop, so I gotta put that candle out and remember all those people who died in that candle factory. It's just such a sad tragedy, and it's turning into sort of a Triangle Shirtwaist Factory story where they wouldn't let those people go home, even though there were horrific forecast of tornado. That's Beatrice. Beatrice, I love that Beatrice practices on our lovely piano. We just got it tuned and repaired for Beatrice to be here live with us. It's a beautiful thing. Beatrice comes and practices, and she finds the most beautiful chords and chord changes and chord superimpositions that you've ever heard, and it's beautiful to work to the soundtrack of Beatrice practicing. She also happens to be our second newest member of the church. She put her name in the book, so that's a special double reason to have us welcome Beatrice to our humble auditorium. It's all yours. No need for a mic. Just we're using the laptop mic.
Okay, good morning. There's so many things to remember today. We will start with the 800,000 Americans worldwide. I don't know what the number is, but we all share in that grief. And as we work through that grief, we understand that we have a purpose for still being here, and in terms of supporting each other and in terms of making things better, in particular for those of us who are oppressed politically, economically, in terms of opportunities. Today is the 19th of December. My brother, Richard Greene, passed away 2 years ago today. He was an activist. He wrote letters to the editor. He was a champion of people who were physically challenged, and he himself was in a wheelchair for several years, but still managed to get out there, and he made opportunities, educational opportunities, was what he for. So I'm remembering him. My nieces may be on the call, so I wanted to definitely remember him. Some of the music is for him and for all people who have passed away. And I'll stop. When am I stop there? Okay. So, in addition to what we've been through, we also remember we have the inheritance of resistance as we heal. And that was There is a Balm in Gilead.
There is a balm in Gilead. Thank you, Beatrice. If you only knew how much better it is than you have for me to be sitting right next to this amazing, beautiful piano, listening to Beatrice play. Thanks again, Beatrice. So anyway, welcome everybody. There's quite a few of you, and we welcome you to our little broadcast here. We wish you were here live, and we will be together someday. Someday we'll be together. That's right. And invite you to come down here during this week. If you can, individually. There's several reasons. The first is that we're writing holiday cards to prisoners. We also we have 8 members behind bars, and we rejoice that 2 of them have been released. One is Arnie King and the other is Tommy Rosa. And we have 8 more that we always try to shower with cards. And if you can't come down, I'd be glad to send you their addresses. Just be in touch through the church or through my own email address, dean@deanstevens.com, and I'll get you a copy of all of the addresses. And we send a lot of cards, as many as we can. Here's one greeting from Pat O'Shea. He's one of the members behind bars at Norfolk. Just a brief note to thank you and all of the others at CCB for all your efforts to help free a deserving man. Hopefully the PB, that would be the parole board, will see the light, so to speak. Please be aware that although I'm not big on writing, I am and will always remain 100% supportive of your work at the church. Hopefully someday soon we will all be able to get back to normal. In closing, some recent news, and this is regarding his effort, which is called Justice Today. He's trying to start a blog inside of writings of people inside Norfolk, and get it out to somebody who will put it in a blog or podcast format. The other reason to come down to the church is that we have a newsletter that will be going out on Wednesday. And there's always, unlike a lot of churches, we still send out paper newsletters through the U.S. Postal Service. And we have a mailing list of approximately 350 right now. And that'll happen. There will be a lot of stamps to put, and not lick anymore, but put on envelopes and whatnot. The other reason is that we have quite a feast down here of holiday stuff, and I'll start with the books. Our maintenance man named Thurman Judge, and our cook and janitor named Luis Guzman have been helping us move books that are the legacy of Bob Datilio. And boy, was he a book collector. And let's just, in the aftermath of 7 trips from his house in Medford, he passed away a year ago, to here, call it a book hoarder. He was buried under an enormous collection of books, and they're still in boxes mostly, but I'll show you what we have here in the auditorium. It's a feast. Come see it. Come help us figure out what to do with them. We could not pass up bringing them here because they would have gone in the dumpster if not.
These books for sale.
What we tried to do was to see if there was anywhere that the president.
And that's just a little fraction. There's a lot more. Luckily, we have a new friend named Jerry Kaplan, who, just like Bob Datilio, is totally obsessed with anarchism of the early 20th century. and the Sacco and Vanzetti case, which is part of the DNA of our church. You see the plaque that's behind us. That Bob was the principal scholar of the Sacco and Vanzetti case, and we now have his enormous collection of books, and it'll be a discernment process to figure out what to do with them because they take up a lot of the auditorium and the third floor. We also have in the auditorium quite a selection of crafts for you to come and pick up as gifts. They are from El Salvador, from a village that I love and am passionate about, the sewing co-op in Teocinte. And I buy as much of it as I can as every time I go down there. We have several members who have been with me on these trips in normal times every 6 months, but we have all kinds of stuff. There's placemats, there's hats, there's purses, there's wallets, there's laptop cases, there's oven mitts. That's our new item. I'll show you one. An oven mitt for your favorite cook. That's our newest item. And all kinds of other stuff. We also have coffee that's imported from yet another village called Isotalillo. It's the only coffee that's served at this church, and that is also sold as a benefit for the church. Fresh roasted, delicious coffee beans, or ground in medium or dark. So I want to also tell you something really exciting, which is that we will soon be on Boston Cable. We are joining forces with Boston Neighborhood Network, which is that cable access facility in Eggleston Square, and putting our broadcasts on your selection of cable, and we're excited to make that happen. And also, as part of going to Boston Neighborhood Network, I'm hoping we can rope in some wonderful young videographers who can help us deliver our message with more elegance, grace, and style. We do it as best we can, but it's a little bit rusty sometimes. So thank you all for being here, and I want to be brief and get back to Beatrice and thank her for being in our presence today and sharing music. We have lots of wonderful music upcoming in the next months. It's different every Sunday pretty much, and we have people beaming in from all over the place with all kinds of different musical selections. So there is Beatrice once again.
Sometimes we're called upon as agents to trouble the water. Reverend Monroe will talk more about that a little later.
Thank you, Beatrice. It was beautiful. I love being here with Beatrice. Got a reading from this book that I love. It's called Children of the Days by Eduardo Galeano, Uruguayan author, my favorite author. I have a whole stack of his books right over there. And this is December 19th. This is a book of days. There's an entry for each one of the days of the year, and it's a style that he wrote in a lot, two or three paragraph vignettes. He wrote an entire history of the Americas in vignettes like that. It's called Memories of Fire. I highly recommend that you check out Eduardo Galeano, passed away maybe 3 or 4 years ago. December 19th, another woman exiled. At the end of 1919, 250 foreign undesirables left the port of New York, forbidden ever to return to the United States. Among those heading off into exile was the highly dangerous foreigner, Emma Goldman, who had been arrested several times for opposing the draft, for promoting contraceptives, for organizing strikes, and for other attacks on national security. Some of Emma's sayings, quote, "Prostitution is the greatest triumph of Puritanism," unquote. Another quote, "Is there anything indeed more terrible, more criminal than our glorified sacred function of motherhood?" Question mark, end of quote. Another quote, "Heaven must be an awfully dull place if the poor in spirit live there." Another quote, "If voting changed anything, it would be illegal." Another quote, "Every society has the criminals it deserves." And her final quote, "All wars are wars among thieves who are too cowardly to fight and therefore induce the young manhood of the whole world to do the fighting for them." Whoa, Emma Goldman. And by the way, I'll mention that there's a stack of books this high in Bob Datilio's collection about Emma Goldman. I don't know much about her, but I am hungry to find out after hearing those quotes and seeing those books. I just cannot express what having these books means. There's a downside, which is that they take up a lot of space. But there is this upside that makes me want to come here and be here, which is that it's an amazing history and education of, especially of the 20th century, the earliest 20th century anarchism and immigrant activism. It is just remarkable feast of books and of learning. I'll show you, by the way, a couple of pins that I got from Bob's house. There's hundreds of them. That's Sacco and that's Vanzetti. Pins from the Sacco Vanzetti Commemoration Society that has a lot of information and images. And there will be more of that information and images as soon as some of Bob's collection of research and papers and documents and posters are brought out and displayed. One book I happened to find, Crystal Rollins Jackson, who I want to thank for putting out yet another beautiful newsletter. It's almost to your door and to your TV laptop screen, but Crystal has been saying Bob's collection is kind of low on African American books, but I did find one for her, and it's called Paul Robeson Speaks. And you know, you don't have time to read 2 inches worth of 600 pages of book. So you open it to any page, and it so happens that I opened it this morning to something that's two fascinating things. It's called Tribute to William L. Patterson. I didn't know who he was, but I just happened to remember that he won our Sacco and Vanzetti Award in 1979. And I want to learn more about who he is, so we can maybe someday have a page on our website that is a link to all of those award winners of our Sacco and Vanzetti Award. Of course, most recently it was Julian Assange. The year before that it was Daniel Ellsberg, and it goes back all the way to the very first one, William Kunstler, in the early 70s, attorney who defended all kinds of radical people. This is Paul Robeson speaking. Robeson never sang at community church, and I'm amazed. I found in the archives that they tried to get him to sing. Community church used to meet in places like Symphony Hall, and 2,000 people might come to hear W.E.B. Du Bois or Thurgood Marshall speak to a huge stage, to a huge crowd of people. Paul Robeson's son spoke about his father, but Robeson never gave a concert, as far as I can find in the archives. Anyway, this is talk about William Patterson, head of the Civil Rights Congress, an organization which has made a magnificent struggle for the Trenton Six, which I don't know about, Willie McGee, and the Martinsville Seven. One thing that comes to my mind, Robeson continues, in thinking of civil rights cases is the days of the Sacco and Vanzetti case. I was then finishing school and beginning to think of my career. I didn't know much of what was behind the political things of the time. I remember reading in the paper that Elizabeth Gurley Flynn and Patterson were up in Massachusetts defending the rights of Sacco and Vanzetti. It goes on from there, and I won't continue, but it talks about the Scottsboro Boys and other cases that William L. Patterson was involved in. So let's find out more about William L. Patterson and celebrate all the other good troublemakers that have come across our radar screen. And I think that Irene Monroe is in that category. And I know that because I listen fastidiously to the podcast that's called ALL REV'D UP. And I love when there's a new edition to listen to in the car. It's Reverend Irene Monroe and Reverend Emmett Price, and it's on WGBH, and their regular presence on Jim and Marjorie program. And that's why it's just a really incredible treat to have Irene taking up the pulpit, occupying our pulpit, to quote Donald Lothrop, on this holiday Sunday morning. We're so glad to have you talk about that little topic we love so much, American exceptionalism. Irene Monroe is where did my, here is a public theologian, ordained minister, syndicated columnist, and can be heard on the podcast and standing Boston Public Radio segment of ALL REV'D UP on WGBH 89.7. Reverend Irene, I'm going to spotlight you, and you can take it away.
Well, first of all, good morning, everyone, and thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I think this is my third time here at Community Church, and I do look forward to the day that I'm actually in the congregation with you all here. But I'm glad to be at your pulpit while I stand on my desk treadmill to talk with you this morning here. I want to give not only a shout out to each of you, but to Dean, but a special shout out to Beatrice Greene. I just love your music. Whenever you're in concert, you must let me know, because I have to tune in here. But I'm so moved to come and talk with you on this Sunday for sundry reasons. But I want to start first with something that Dean did as he opened up service today, and he lit a candle, and he said he did it in memory of people who have passed on. And I listened to Dean talk about who passed on, and I also listened to Beatrice Greene, who said this is the anniversary of her brother's passing here. And one of the things in depicting her brother, she said that he was an activist, and so I want to share with you today an activist who has passed away, an academic, a scholar, a brilliant person and human being whose human light may have been extinguished, but her light in terms of what she teaches each and every one of us will be everlasting. And I'm talking about our sister friend, Bell Hooks. And from some of you who may not know who Bell Hooks is, it's very, very hard, I think, to be in undergraduate school, at least from the 90s on, if you've taken any kind of political science course or women's studies course of African American or others, to not come across this fabulous, Black feminist theorist and just a good human being all around. But she died just recently, December 15th, and she was 69 years old, and she's from Kentucky. And I want to just stop a second here and say a little bit about that. She's a Black Appalachian, and she's very intentional about that, because one social location has a profound impact in how they see the world. And Bell Hook was the woman who paved the way in terms of the word that is now part of the public lexicon, intersectionality, because she would always talk about white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy, and talk about it in an intersectional way that over time, and I look back at some of her writings and they're saying like, oh my God, she, like so many others, in terms of being this Black woman situated up in the hills of Kentucky, understood what it means to be Black from that particular region in the world, coming from a history of slavery. And speaking about that, she took the name Bell Hooks because it was in honor of her great grandmother. And so this is a woman who's written like in feminist theory from margin to center, where she opens up this whole new sort of lens for us to understand the space of radical openness and to really confirm something called the oppositional gaze, meaning deconstructing the white gaze in which has dominated our world here. But I thought that what I would do is talk about Bell, because I was going to talk about American exceptionalism and manifest destiny. And in some ways, while I won't be specifically talking about this topic, I realized that in some ways, in order to really begin to deconstruct those topics, those terminologies, I need to have this particular conversation with you today, which is about healing our isms. And one of the things that Bell talks about here, and I want to just use a couple of her quotes here. I had a particular scripture. You don't, particularly as a Black minister, come the Sunday before Christmas and don't talk about Jesus. So in some ways I'm heretical because I'm talking about Bell, but I think Jesus wouldn't mind that I was talking about this woman who was certainly a justice warrior in our lifetime here. But she says that, this is a quote by her, she says that love is an act of will, both an intention and an act. And I have two more I want to share with you. And another one is, there can be no love without justice. And this is one that is also quite important. The heart of justice is truth telling. And one of the things that Bell was definitely a truth teller. I wrote an article in tribute to Bell. And one of the things that I says here that I loved her unquiet intellectual energy, her revolutionizing spirit, and her radical love here for change here. And I think that one of the things that when we talk about Jesus in this particular time, or any time really, he's talking about a kind of radical love, a kind of openness, and the way in which that in many ways we don't realize how we contribute to the very isms that sometimes we're very much trying to deconstruct. So let me give you an example of an example that I became aware of. When I started out as a young minister, back in the days here, and I have to just say this, it doesn't matter if you're a straight woman or LGBTQ woman, which I'm a lesbian, they're going to give you a dying church and they expect you to do the Lazarus number, which raise it from the dead. But at the time that I was a minister, we were having a problem that we were not, meaning the African-American community was having a problem here. And so was the nation, if not the entire world, but we weren't addressing it. We were seeing it every day in our lives, but not doing anything about it. And one of the things that Bell challenges us to do is to tell the truth here. And that part of truth telling comes a kind of love here. So one of the things that was happening in the 80s was the AIDS epidemic. And it was, and really, I need to say this, long before the CDC said that the new face of the AIDS epidemic would be a Black heterosexual woman. Well, I was seeing that, being a minister in the Black community, and funeralizing my community, funeralizing Black queer men who at the time, not many people didn't know really the history of the AIDS epidemic. A lot of funeral homes would not funeralize these people. And so there was that moment, that you're called to action. Because one of the things she says in a quote that, part of love is a call to action here. But I realized that that the community was hurting. One, not telling the truth of what's happening. Two, not showing respect to the folks who not only died of AIDS, but also to the families, and say a little bit about the families. A lot of the families felt ashamed, stigmatized because their child was gay. We can kind of like, when I look back at the 80s and look at today, 2021, we still have stigma, but we've come such a long way with being openly LGBTQ. But and interestingly enough, in the latter life of Bell Hooks' life, she comes out as queer, and I wonder how much truth telling did she have to with her own self, to get to this point, because I'm sure she always knew, but it's the telling it of yourself and then acting on it and stuff, which is what I want us to do today with my time with you here. But so one of the things I realized I had to do was I had to deconstruct and try to do something with this notion of how we define Blackness in our community back in the 80s. It was this whole notion that if you were gay, you couldn't be Black. It was a whole kind of dichotomy that was operating, particularly I remember in the women's movement in the 70s, they would ask questions to Black and brown women who had multiple identities. They would say, are you more oppressed being Black, or are you more oppressed, being a woman, as if I can slice it down and just kind of, talk about it in those exact ways here and stuff. And so one of the things that I realized that the challenge for me, as well as for the community, because of coming out of love, is sometimes, Baldwin talked about this, you have to have these difficult conversations. And so the difficult conversation was, let's look at the way we discuss Blackness here. And let's look at it in relationship to talking about it in terms of what we would say back in the day, homosexuality. So I realized that when anybody understands this, when you're teaching or talking to an audience, and especially talking to Black ministers, you have to sort of meet them where they're at. So I realized then that I needed to use a couple of biblical scriptures here that would help them maybe listen with some compassion around the importance of addressing the AIDS epidemic in the community here. And so, I went on and I said here that, Jesus never said anything about homosexuality, but that wasn't flying. I said, Apostle Paul said a whole lot of things about homosexualities and women. One is that he says that women should be obedient to their husbands, and as women, we know better than that. He said slaves ought to be obedient to their slave masters. So I put these two together to say, like, why do we choose one person's word over another, knowing that justice is about truth telling? That if we're serving a God or something greater than ourselves and our community, let's tell the truth so that everybody has the same access to equality and respect that is afforded to people that we think are more privileged, like heterosexuals in our society, or cisgendered people, as we say in our society here and stuff. MLK has never said anything about homosexuality either. And so using a quote by King didn't move the dial. But let me just say this, how I began to move the dial here. One of the things is I said that if you have this notion that in African-American communities, that the only thing that we need to talk about in terms of Black liberation theology or just Black liberation rhetoric is about race and nothing else, then you ignore the plight of Black women. But even if you say we don't have Black queers in our communities, as if you're not looking at the choir loft, the point is that if you ignore Black queers in your community, well, then you can't really talk about Black liberation, because you can't have a liberation movement when you don't have women, you don't have queers, you don't have all the people that you deem as outsiders or would disrupt the discourse around a solid Black liberation theology conversation. So in talking with them about that then what you set up is really what Bell would call patriarchy, a Black church patriarchy that's leaving out at least 2/4 of its congregation here. And that we needed to begin, and she in many ways, in her whole sort of lifetime has always talked about the intersections of oppression. And so we can't set up this notion, and we operate out of this, even though we're moving more into an intersectional kind of praxis in life, this hierarchy of oppression, saying that one group is more oppressed than the other. And so what happens is you can't say that Black men are more oppressed than Black queers or Black women, because we all face some of the same things: driving while Black, sitting in Starbucks while Black, police brutality. So it's about how do we begin to sort of work against these kinds of fractions that we just set up in order to, we think we're doing justice work, but actually what we're doing is that we're just setting up a hierarchy of oppression. But also what comes with that, because one of the things Bell talks about is that we have to tell the truth. And I always love this particular quote that many of you know. Is from Pastor Niemoller. He was a Nazi, he fought against the Nazis, and he comes up with this wonderful quote that we used. And I know that many have seen it. They said that, when they first came for the socialists, I didn't speak up because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the unionists, and I didn't speak up, and it goes down. And then they said, then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak. And so one of the things is that we have to speak up also about in terms of what we want to do around justice. This is a particular time in history that we're at. It's an inflection point, definitely, when we look at 2020 and the lynching of George Floyd. But then it's an interesting time because all of this is not only happening in a pandemic, and just when we thought we were getting out of 2020, 2021 comes, and there's the insurrection, and there's still problems here. We've seen, anti-racism, but then we've seen sort of the trans community always being, treated with disrespect, if not killed. We saw anti-Asian hate operating with this particular spar, being blown up. So there's a lot that we have to do. There's a lot, I always say, that we want to do, but a lot of times we don't realize that you can't heal the world if you don't heal yourself. So it's important that as we're doing this simultaneously, that we're not saying that I'm going to go out, okay, and heal the world. I'm going to go out and be a social justice advocate. And I've done no work to understand some of the maybe micro, but some even the macro aggressions that we carry. I'll give you a classic example. I know that at MLK Day, we will always stop and pause for MLK. I hear a lot of folks, white folks in particular, who say they love MLK but afraid of Black men. I know people who say I like Chinese food but don't have any problem with the anti-Asian sentiment that they hear and stuff that is going on. So this kind of talk with you today is a kind of talk that when I think about the Christian narrative of this time, this whole idea of Joseph and Mary trying to find a place for them with this baby that was just born, and trying to find, this whole notion that there's no room in the inn, where this baby is born, and how the circumstances of his death, and we certainly know the circumstances of his I call it lynching, but crucifixion here, makes us have to look inwardly about what kind of isms are we perpetuating today, so that there are certain people who are not welcome in the inn, that there's no room in the inn. And one of the things that we've been talking about that has become part of our work to sort of reckon what has been a serious problem in our country is to look at the dominance or the supremacy of whiteness. And I need to say this when I talk about whiteness, because if anybody has listened to me on the radio or the podcast for that matter, I always say that we got to understand that white supremacy is an ideology. It is not just the province of white people. that we do indeed have Black white supremacists. And while it might seem like an oxymoron of terms, I'll give you a classic example of that. I think many would understand. And when I say supremacy, Black supremacists, they have power to affect legislation. A good example would be Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, Dr. Carson, and Ben Carson, and maybe Tim Scott. I'm still kind of thinking about where I stand with Tim Scott here. And so the point is that I'm not talking about someone who is very much an assimilationist, but I'm talking about someone that assimilationist but don't have power. I'm talking about someone who has power to affect change in society and still uphold the ideology of white supremacy. So one of the things that I think many of us have been talking about, is how do we deconstruct whiteness? So one of the things I thought we would do, and I know I have to stay within the constraints of 25 minutes, and I don't know how you give a Black minister 25-minute sermon, but I'm going to do my best here. But one of the things that is part and parcel of Black conversation as well as Black sermons is call and response. So this here part here is your call and response part, and we're small enough and intimate enough that we can have this conversation. So I have two questions that I'm going to pose to you. We're going to deal with them separately, but then we're going to talk a little more about how we will affect change. And the reason, let me just say a little bit about this. The reason why I want to do this with this small group here is that when President Trump was elected, I know that November, a lot of folks said it's going to be real difficult to go home. Some didn't go home. I can't tell you friendships that have just severed. People who avoided going home that Thanksgiving. Some who've even said to me, look, I can't talk to my folks here. And so the point is that one of the things that Bell invites us to do is to have those difficult conversations in a civil way, not in a way that is incendiary, that humiliates and denigrates people, because we all, in many ways, in a white supremacist capitalist patriarchy, this is not my term, this is Bell Hook's term, carry some of this stuff with us, whether we're cognizant of it or not. And so having said this, I want to, and I'm looking at the time, I want to just pose two questions to you, and I want us to sort of play with it a bit, and then I will promise you I will wrap us up. So the two questions is this: how are you white, and how white are you? Okay, so let's go with the first question here. And for some of you, I hope you will unmute yourself and you will dialogue with me, and if not, I can always pull on Dean, my friend. But the question is, the first one, how are you white? Okay, and now remember this as I opened up. Now, white supremacy is not just the province of white people. All right, so I don't want anybody saying, oh, she's picking on me because I'm white. I'm talking about an ideology that has framed and constrained our culture to be this kind of multi-democracy that we want, this pluralistic kind of society where all people of all faith and no faith are welcome. So let's play with this for a second. So how are you white? Anyone? Do I have any takers? Well, I see Sarah smiling, but she's not on mute, so I can't call on her yet. Okay, I don't have any takes here. I see. Let me see the whole frame here. Let me see here. Oh, I'm right. I don't have any takes. All right. So Dean, I'm gonna mess with you.
Mess with me.
All right.
I'm pink.
Okay. Say more.
And I'm of European descent.
Okay.
100%. So that's, if you define that as white, that's a me.
Okay. All right. Listen, fine. And any others? Marsha, I think I see Marsha. Marsha, please. Now I'm just asking you, how are you white?
I am white because I have some inherited wealth, because my parents were able to buy a house later on because I had educational opportunities that are denied some people, because I present white. And I was able to get ahead and live in a cozy suburb. And in those ways, I am white.
All right. All right.
And I'm not questioned by the police. I can pull the, oh, I'm a woman, and I'm like, oh, officer, why did you pull me over kind of thing, which I'm not ashamed to say I've done. And I'm not immediately suspect
That's right.
in any,
And you don't
and
have to
even
be-
when I wasn't old.
You don't have to be afraid of your children walking.
You're right. I don't have to be afraid of my children walking. I can knock on a door in my suburban neighborhood without somebody calling the police.
Right. Right.
So in those ways, I am white.
All right. All right. I think now, did I mess with you, Sarah? Because now I see your hand up. Can I? Okay, Sarah, thank you.
So I will respond, even though I'm sort of shy about these things, since you noticed my expression. I don't know how to answer that question other than maybe to follow up on the comment a moment ago. I can walk into a room or walk down the street and feel, be perceived as white. But many of us have scars that you don't see. And I guess in my heart, I don't feel like the mainstream culture. I'm Jewish. I'm a child of Holocaust survivors. I'm psychologically being raised by my parents, feel what it's like to be a second-class citizen. And so that's a difficult question for me.
All right. All right. Well, thank you so much, though. Thank you so much for sharing. I think, Jose, am I saying it correctly?
Yes, Jose.
Okay,
Hi,
now-
thank you for the
Hi.
conversation. I am, according to Ancestry.com, 52% Native American, Mayan, more specifically. But growing up in El Salvador with Gone with the Wind, with Hollywood movies, there is a whiteness within me that is also a mechanism to fit in the elitist society I grew up with. I am very conscious of it, and I try to diminish that, and I try to change that, and it's a constant effort. But I know, being Mayan, being a Native American, that the most convenient color to associate yourself with is the white color.
Thank you so much, Jose, here and stuff. So many of you have answered the question, really. How are you white? So Marcia started it off with talking about white privilege here. It's talking, she talks about a privilege where, and I loved it where she said she doesn't have to think about that if she stopped by the cops. She's pretty much 99% of the time will walk away with her life, unlike Sandra Bland, who was stopped in East Texas for a traffic signal and end up days later dead. You know, I live here in Cambridge, and again, we're a liberal bastion, but I can't begin to tell you how my spouse has been stopped by the cops numerous times because she's gender nonconforming. She's a Black woman driving a Beamer. A Beamer has been derisively called a Black man's wagon. But the most noticeable moment of being stopped by police here in Cambridge is Professor Henry Louis Gates in 2009. If many of you recall here, he was trying to get into his house. Now, if you know anything about Professor Gates, now he's a professor at Harvard. I don't know if many of you watch his PBS show, Finding Our Roots Here. He's well known throughout Cambridge, but let me tell you why he's also not a threat. Well, although he was perceived to be a threat here, Professor Gates is disabled. He cannot walk without his cane here. So here's the cops all coming, at this man who is trying to get into his house. This became a the beer summit. This became international. And so what it tells you is that, see, it doesn't matter if you are a well-known Harvard professor, MacArthur scholar, okay, you do not have white privilege. Even if you are living in a privileged part of town, like in Cambridge, he lives in the 02138 zip code, because that's the Harvard zip code. It doesn't matter. White privilege is something that we have to deconstruct here. So that's the stuff about how do we begin to deconstruct that in ourselves. And Jose was so wonderful to say, you know, he's cognizant of how he himself participates in that. So the second question here is this here, you know, how white are you? Now that's the question. How white are you here? Listen, I see hands up, but I don't see anybody unmiked. So I see is it Homer? Homer, can I go with you?
How about Susan?
Susan, okay, Susan. Oh, Susan, okay, you unmiked. Thank you.
Okay. What I was going to say had more to do with the last question, but maybe it moves into this one.
Yeah, please,
yeah.
Please.
I think when I think about this, there are two perspectives: there's internal and external. And the internal, my internal perception of my whiteness, I'm still struggling with. But then there's the external, that white seems like a label that people of many colors will put on me because of what I look like. And my preference is to be identified with something more geographic. Like sometimes I say I'm Anglo-American, which at least resonates a little bit better with me. And I will continue to struggle with my internal perceptions of my whiteness. I know it's wrapped up with so much privilege that I don't even know I have. I think I have most of them, except for excessive wealth. And so that's what I wanted to say about that. Thank you.
No, thank you for sharing. I think Homer is unmiked, if I'm looking correctly. Am I? Homer, are you unmiked?
Yes, I
Thank
guess
you.
so. Yeah. I'd just like to inject a couple of ideas into the discussion. First of all, I think it's important to define our terms. I think in life, in human activity, there will always be hierarchies. And when we talk about superiority, we're talking about who's superior and who is inferior and who's somewhere in between. So that's the first thing, is that there have been and always will be hierarchies. Now, and then so that means that there'll be some kind of superiority, and there'll be some kind of inferiority always. Now, so now we come to how it is we divide people up. And one of the ways we can divide people up is skin color. And so it has happened that in Western civilization, we have somehow decided, I say we collectively, historically, have decided that the white skin is superior to the black skin. And so now I come in, and I don't, as far as I know, I didn't choose my race before, or my skin color before I was born. That's the whole question of what was your face before you were born? And so that's a nice, esoteric or question. But I guess I guess we've decided in our discourse to identify whiteness with superiority, hence the term white superiority. But that has been a social contemporary, historical choice that has been made, and I'm not sure what we can do about it. But when it's just but when we discuss these things, figures like Clarence Thomas and Tim Scott and so on, we say that even though their skin is black, they have chosen whiteness. And I don't know, that's the way the discussion is going. So we have critical race theory and et cetera, which is, I guess, a productive discussion. But I just think we have to remember, as we individually think about this, that everybody is a victim of hierarchy. And I don't know what to do about hierarchy.
All right, Homer, thank you. So moving forward here, one of the things that we're trying to deconstruct is very much hierarchy. And the way in which we do that is have a much more intersectional kind of discourse here. So when I'm asking you the question here, and you did it, and everyone got it, yeah, we're not only talking about white privilege. We gotta understand how that hierarchy is not only erected but maintains itself over time, as many more people are trying to enter into the discourse and say, here, we too would want to be part of this kind of conversation. And let's shift this dominant paradigm to be a much more multicultural and participatory paradigm here. So when I ask you, this is the question, and I think in some way Sarah hit on this one. When I'm asking you how white are you? I'm asking you, when did you get your white card? Because there was a time when immigrants came here, they would have signs to say no Black folks, no Italians, no Jews. It would go on and on. But something is lost with falling under this rubric, this title of white supremacy. And while you may not choose to identify yourself as white, we got to look at all of the indicators, whether you do it on your census, whether you did it on your college application or your job application or whatever, that there's a material reality about that you either willingly uphold or unwillingly. And so what I'm trying to do here is, as we think about Jesus in this moment, because again, it's the whole idea of the birth of Jesus, that there's no room in the end. So if you have a hierarchy, there will never be any room in the end. So that as much as I try to, it's so very interesting, as much as we say, many folks, and particularly Christians, that we love Jesus, but we still got anti-Semitism operating. So we got to look at the ways that in micro and macro ways, in our effort to do justice, as being called liberal and progressive people, that we always have to look at the ways in which we might reinscribe the very thing that we are against, because it is so pervasive and so ingrained as to be invisible. And so that is the kind of stuff that I'm trying to get us to think about as we marshal in this new year of 2022 with some new thoughts about how will we comport differently so that we don't continue to see the same things in our neighborhood happen to our neighbors. And we won't even talk about the news, the horror scene. I was just yesterday, I think I was my first section of the New York Times comes in, and they had 2021 in pictures. And I said to my spouse, I said, honey, I can't get through it. I just can't get through it. I don't know if you've seen any of them that have been on that. Just when we look at just what 2021 continues to has looked like, it almost don't give us hope for 2022, but the hope is in us. The change is in us. And sometimes it's in those intractable things that we think we can't deconstruct or do differently, like hierarchies. Because if we continue with hierarchies, then men will always dominate and women will always be subordinate. We will always have that kind of grouping that as we marshal forward, we must look at this differently. Because my goodness, I'm the beneficiary of the civil rights movement. I thought that was a scary time, but my goodness, I think this is one too. But I do think that what comes with this moment here is also a third Reconstruction. Some say that the first Reconstruction was right after the Civil War, and we get the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment here. And then we look at the Civil Rights Movement, and then we get the Voting Rights Act, and we get the Civil Rights Act. And so now here we are, again, chaotic in many ways. It's a tinderbox in so many ways, but in this particular hot cauldron, is in this moment that we can affect change. And as we do this, we can't just do it in a singular way. That as we go out and change the world, we also have to change the world in us, that we are not always cognizant of, but it has to start here before it can actually materialize itself out in the world here. In any questions before I wrap up? Dean, I see you looking like you want to say something.
I just wanted to say at some point we want to hear from Beatrice again.
Yes.
And this might be that moment. This is also the moment where I point out that I have put our website as well as our physical address in the chat. You can access the website and help us move this church along, keep this building warm, and pay our bills by credit card or by PayPal at that website, or by check to the address that's in the box. So there's my pitch, and let's get it on to what we want to hear, which is Beatrice. And I will put her right in the camera, right like this, thusly, like that. Hi.
We definitely thank you, Reverend Monroe.
See that squirrel? Look
Look
how far out on a limb he is.
Oh, that's nothing.
That's nothing. He went back
I'm
in.
sorry.
The scripture that comes to mind, which is this, I base this piece on two scriptures, the Valley of Dry Bones, because I think that's where a lot of us are at, internally as well as politically. We're in a space of dryness, so we have to get to another place. The other part of it is we not conform to this world, but be transformed. And so this is what I hear or I relate to in Reverend Monroe's speaking, presentation, preaching. So the piece that I'm about to play is called Transformation Tapestry / Dry Bones.
Let's all thank Beatrice Greene for being with us this morning. That's a beautiful piece. Beautiful piece. Valley of Dry Bones. Well, we've had, this is generally when we do the Q&A, but we've had a lot of back and forth during Reverend Irene's talk. But I want to ask you something. We have right next to the church a new restaurant coming in. It's been under construction for almost 2 years, and it's opening, hopefully, I don't know about hopefully, but it's opening at the end of December, and it's called Chick-fil-A. And like most of you know, the owners of Chick-fil-A are pretty famously homophobic and support some pretty famously homophobic organizations. And it's a very strange thing. This building housed the Theater Offensive for about 10 years. They just moved away, sadly, and we miss them very much. And this auditorium was the rehearsal place for their youth troupe, which is called True Colors. And the question is how to be a neighbor, and how to be both a good neighbor and how to express our disdain for that. And it's not about those people who work there. Those people just need a job, and I don't think they have to pass a litmus test to get that job. But it's just something that I've been thinking about, and I proposed, and we haven't come to a decision, and that we put an enormous rainbow flag on a flagpole right next to it, and or is that not the greatest way to express your neighborliness? Is that kind of like a bad opening salvo, if you will? We will have to, be dealing with them. We're their neighbors. We share a fire escape. We have had a bunch of interactions with the construction company. So I don't know if you all remember, but in 2012, Mayor Menino said very vigorously, "No, thank you, Chick-fil-A. We are a city that embraces people of the same gender marrying. We are a city that embraces homosexual people." So it's interesting that we are here right next to them. Your thoughts, Reverend Irene?
Oh, my thoughts on that. Well, I do hope you treat them neighborly, that number one, because the only way you change hearts is by respecting people's humanity. That's number one. But my understanding, if I got my facts correct, is that they have made some changes is why they're here. Because as you mentioned, it was 2012 that Menino just wasn't having it. He certainly said that they had to make some changes. So my understanding, they have made some changes. I mean, I think that you don't invite somebody in a community that says that it's open and affirming of all people, and then let you set up business. And Massachusetts has always been, in many ways, or at least tries to be on a lot of issues, that beacon on the hill here. So my understanding that they're here because they have changed.
Well, that's good. We'll have to investigate that and find out. It'll be really interesting. It's a very popular restaurant, and there's one down in Dedham. There's a line of cars waiting for their takeout, and it'll be interesting because we have a restaurant that is fairly hip, vegetarian, environmental, planetary consciousness and whatnot. Not a perfect tenant by any stretch, but really a pretty great situation with this restaurant, and getting along quite quite well with our own restaurant concession downstairs. I wonder if anybody else has any thoughts or ideas about this. I'd invite you to come down. Should we go in and eat there? I don't know. Nobody has any thoughts. Okay, well, I know that I'm going to meet the manager over there, and it should be an item of conversation. What is Chick-fil-A's position on this now? Have they changed who they donate to, and what are there any personnel policies that broach that subject? It's all very interesting down here in Copley Square. Susan, go ahead.
Yeah, I see no harm in the rainbow flag. I think it'd be a good thing. You're a UU church. Unitarian Universalism is very out front, embracing GBLTQ rights. And even if they weren't there, I think showing a rainbow flag would be great.
Yeah. In fact, Susan, I would say not only are we open and affirming, but before that term was even invented, we hired Bill Alberts. Bill Alberts had been performed a same-sex marriage in 1972.
Wow.
And was summarily fired from Old West Church and defrocked from the Methodist denomination as a result. And a couple years passed, and we hired him. That was to us a badge of honor. Before even open and affirming was a thing in UUdom. So we're here, and we're here to say that loud and proud. And Reverend Irene Monroe, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. I want to wish you all a joyous holiday, and in lifting up the birth of Jesus, that we understand that may we move forward where no child or no one has to look for fitting in the inn.
Down here in this auditorium, it's starting to smell real good because Luis Guzman has laid out some pupusas for us. If you haven't tasted pupusas, you're in for a treat when you come down here on a Sunday. You're welcome to be here. We're not trying to keep people away. We ask that you take the proper precautions. If you're not speaking or singing, be masked, and urge you to be vaccinated and boosted as well. But this is an open place. We do have one physical event that I want to tell you about, and it is on January 11th. I hope I got that date right. Look it up for sure. It's Mazen Kumsia. Professor Mazen Kumsia has been with us a couple of times before, and he's just a wonderful, engaging Palestinian speaker and professor. He is the founder and director of the Palestine Museum of Natural History through Bethlehem University. That's where he's from, is Bethlehem, but he will be here physically with us. This is we have so far two co-sponsors. One is Jewish Voice for Peace. The other is a group that meets here in normal times. It's Muslims for Progressive Values. We could probably get an endorsement from UUs for Justice in the Middle East because a couple of their members are with us here today, and we just haven't put the word out. We also just want to really invite you to be here physically for that event. We have enough space for maybe about 40 people with all these books that take up half the room. But Susan, you had a word about that as well?
Dean, I think you need to double check. Last I heard, Mazen was not coming to the States. So anyway, But even if it's a totally virtual event, you might like to have people there in person anyway. So
Yes,
just
okay.
double check.
I will double check. It might have been a change of plans. I have not heard.
It was
from
the word I got was quite recent. Yeah.
Steve Lowe of the Gralta Foundation is who I set it up with. And so I'll give him a call and find out about that. But we have had Mazen virtually, so that is always an option. If we do it in the evening, it means that it's like 3 in the morning in Palestine. So that'll be a difficult thing to negotiate. Maybe we'll have to do him on a Sunday instead.
See what you can do. But I'm sure Mazen will do what it takes to get his message out. Yeah.
Susan Nye from UUs for Justice in the Middle East. Thanks for letting me know that little news, and we'll confirm that eventually. Thanks again. Have we lost Reverend Monroe? I think we have. So we're getting ready to have some pupusas and join us on a future Sunday. If not, I hope you have an incredible holiday with your friends and family. And I will end with a song I love. You can find this song on my virtual holiday album. It's on SoundCloud, and it's called Holiday Songs You Won't Hear at the Mall. And this song says, Noel, 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 sing we loud. God today hath lifted up the poor and casted down the proud. Noel, 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 sing we loud. God today hath lifted up the poor and casted down the proud. It's a longer song, but I'll just leave you with that little part of it. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Charlie, for being our tech guru. Richard Crowley, lovely to see you, and hope to see you soon. Sarah Freeman, Faye Strigler, Lenny, Melissa, thank you for being with us. Judy Batat, thank you so much for joining us. And Dorothy Weitzman, Barry Warner. Thank you, iPhone, for joining us. Thank you, Carol and Noel. I just sang a song to you, Noel, and Herman Hampton. And I believe that is Alan joining us from north of Bangor, Maine. Thank you, everybody, for being with us. And we declare the meeting at the building to soon be over, soon be over. And we'll see you again soon. This is also archived on our YouTube channel. You can see it there, as well as all of our concerts. In January, join us every Friday for a music event. It's called Winter Fridays, and it'll be on this very same link that you can get there on a Friday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Love you, everybody. Come down to the church, see the books, see the crafts, see the coffee, and see the building, and say hello to us and keep us company. Happy holidays.